Pamela. Take my Pamela. The American people want to stop the chaos.
And end the drama
with a cool new stepmama.
That's Vice President Harris jetting into New York City last night to appear on Saturday Night Live. It's the show's final episode before the election, so who didn't get an invite? Donald Trump on the other side of the 2024 ticket. Mary Katharine Ham is host of the Getting Hammered podcast. Charlie Hurt is opinion editor of the Washington Times, and both are Fox News contributors. Here's a headline that I remember. This is from October 7th. Saturday Night Live head insists there will be no Trump or Harris cameos this season, and he cited equal time provisions. He said, you can't bring the actual people who are running on because of election laws and the election time provisions. You can't have the main candidates without having all the candidates, and there are lots of minor candidates that are only on the ballot in like 3 states, and that becomes really complicated. What happened there, Mary Katharine?
Very interesting, Lauren. What did happen? I don't know. Look, I'm not mad that somebody goes on SNL. You can take it up with the folks in Detroit, who I think she was going to go see, and then took a detour to NYC to do this. The skit was fine. I thought Maya Rudolph was carrying it. I thought, like, can she be president? So I don't know how much it gets you. She's done a lot of these things where she's trying to sort of soften herself and look like she can interact like a normal person, and I don't know how well it comes off all the time. Trump would do well in the same situation, but I think he's taking his moments in a garbage truck and at McDonald's, and he kind of does his showman thing in those spaces and doesn't really need to be on SNL and goes viral.
Does NBC get punished for this? I don't know. Does the FCC come down on them, or is this a sign that they see something where, hey man, we had to make a radical change here because she was flying to Michigan. Yeah. The plane was diverted to New York. Are they seeing something where like, hey man, we need a Hail Mary pass?
Well, they have pretty good testimony from Lorne Michaels right there. It would seem to be a problem. But could you imagine if them allowing Donald Trump to come in and do the cold open?
Their heads would explode.
Yeah, and it wouldn't happen. But I agree with Mary Katharine that, the problem, this is the problem with doing sort of the Hollywood campaign. I think it actually makes people feel like they're more disconnected from her, whereas you have Trump doing these sort of more organic things and highly entertaining, by the way. That gets he seems to break the internet about 3 times a week, and so he gets that sort of into the culture stream pretty well on his own without the help from Beyonce and Lizzo or Maya Rudolph.
In the last little bit, Kamala Harris is going to try to change back to unity. We started with unity, we went to fascism, and now we're back to unity. Listen to this as call for number 4. I think that we have it.
There's one more thing Trump and his Republican friends want to do. They want another giant tax cut for the wealthy. Now, I know some of you guys are tempted to think it's macho guy. I'll tell you what, man. When I was in Scranton, we used to have a little trouble going down the plot once in a while. For green reasons. But I'm serious. These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
All right, so sorry, that was not the right one, but it's still a fun one. Okay, she's going to try to close on unity, and then, President Biden has to come in there and undercut her.
Yeah, I mean, this is the way it always goes. By the way, we'll know that how mad Biden is if the FCC does go after SNL.
Yeah.
He's behind the scenes like, wait, maybe you can get him. Look, I kind of want to laugh at that, but also he's the president of the United States of America. So that kind of concerns me that he's with gusto saying those kind of things on the trail. I'm sure she doesn't appreciate it. And the thing about unity is I do have trouble unifying with someone who calls half the country fascists and fascist supporters, and the allies who call the Madison Square Garden rally a Nazi rally. Like, I do think it's hard to come together in that way. And I think that undercuts her message.
I don't know what you guys have observed over the past week, but it's sure been stunning, some of the reporting that's been going on, and maybe you were living on a different planet. Call for number 3. Hugh Hewitt had quite a moment the other day, and I just want to ask you specifically about the coverage, et cetera. Here's Hewitt first.
Is it me, or does it seem like this week Donald Trump is laying the groundwork for contesting the election by complaining that cheating was taking place in Pennsylvania by suing Bucks County for alleged irregularities?
We are news people. We have to report the whole story. So, yes, he's upset about Bucks County, but he was right, and he won in court.
I don't appreciate being lectured about reporting.
I will come back, Jonathan. I'm done. I'm done. This is the most unfair election ad I have ever been a part of.
He left that interview and then quit the Washington Post. When you think about the comedian at Madison Square Garden, when you think about what Trump of the night saying he'll protect women, he was talking about crime and illegals. They made it seem it was all about abortion. And the New York Times did a big write-up about it and did not quote what Trump actually said. Just what is, in these closing weeks or days, what is your view about how the media's handled this?
I mean, not to be overly harsh about it, but I do feel like there is a deep, profound concern among a lot of people at the New York Times and people like Jonathan Capehart who are terrified. They're starting to realize that, oh my gosh, the orange monster really is on course to come back and be president again. Now, obviously, we have no idea what's going to happen on Tuesday, but I think they're freaking out and they are sort of letting their slip show, and they're not even, whatever pretense was left of them trying to be fair and balanced about these things is completely gone out the window. They're not, and you know, the idea that Hugh Hewitt is a very cerebral, balanced, normal, intelligent guy. And the idea that Capehart is going to sit there and lecture him like he's some sort of right-wing nut job is just idiotic. And of course, this comes after Jeff Bezos has dropped the hammer on his Washington Post and said, hey, listen, guys, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to try to actually start reporting the news accurately. And you know, the frustration has reached a peak with.
I would say after this election is over, there's going to be a deep read that will be required for many of us.
But it's a great question you ask. How many times have we said that? After how many elections have we said that? And I do think that the credibility gets washed away with each one of these elections, which I think is a good thing.
Well, and in a time of plummeting public trust, like this country is desperately in need of reliable narrators. A politician's going to sway things their way on either side, right? But the press's actual job is to tell the truth about these things so that people who are reading the news don't have to go and watch 3 primary sources and parse it out. In this case, Hugh's doing the job of the reporter, of the reliable narrator. He's bringing facts to the table. He's an unflappable guy. He's very mild-mannered, and they ticked him off enough that he walked. But I'm glad the viewers got some facts before.
Mark Halperin in his morning newsletter said something similar about the media coverage of this election. So, I mean, in 2016, you had the reporters had to go out and do all these stories about how they missed it. Right? So we might see that again. We might, but we will.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for getting up on Sunday, okay?
Thank you.
Make the most of your day.
I will.
Thanks, MK. Thank you, Charlie.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.